is not an excuse for us to not have done this. We had cell service. We could have easily called multiple people and said, we're leaving the cabin now. If you don't hear from us in 45 minutes, then something's wrong. But we didn't do that.
Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Shane Patrick.
And with me, as always, is Phil Freeman. Tonight we're going to be talking with Ryan Skorecki, helicopter pilot, flown all over the world. If you want to learn more about him or other things we talk about at 10-Minute Travels, check us out at 10minutetravels.com.
Let's get right to it, shall we? There's in our friendship circle, I heard a story about you one time, and this is a side note. It's not helicopter based, but it's definitely travel based. Where you were with some friends in Prince William Sound, and with a boat, and it turned dicey. And I wondered if you might be able to share that story with us, because I don't even know any of the particulars. I just know that it came close.
Yeah. Strong work. So, yeah, that story, that was in... I think that was 2009. And that was some friends from here. There were 4 of us and a dog, and we went down to one of the friends. She grew up in Homer, and her family had a cabin in Bear Cove outside of Homer in Kachemak Bay. And so the plan was we were going to try and go out to that cabin and go skiing. So we brought all of our ski gear and stuff to stay out in this cabin for a couple days, and we had like a 20-foot like flat bottom John boat, I think they call it, but small motorboat, and we left from the Homer Spit and went from the Spit directly across, like almost to, I guess it'd be Halibut Cove, and then from there we were kind of like on the south shore of Kachemak Bay and just offshore, and buzzed along till we got to Bear Cove, kind of like at the eastern end of Kachemak Bay. And we got out there, and the beetle kill was all the down trees. It just made it so that we kind of couldn't go. We couldn't get anywhere near where the snow couldn't get near any good skiing, just because trying to walk through the forest of down trees was it just made it impossible. And so we just hung out at the cabin instead. Drank beer and cooked food and played cards. And then when we decided to go back, we, packed up the boat, and in hindsight, we should have, it's not an excuse for us to not have done this. We had cell service. We could have easily called multiple people and said, we're leaving the cabin now. If you don't hear from us in 45 minutes, then something's wrong. But we didn't do that. And then the second mistake we made was, instead of going back the way we had come, where we were right along the shore, we kind of just went diagonally across the bay. So it put us like in the middle of Kachemak Bay. And once we got into the middle of the bay, there was some big waves, like big rolling waves. They weren't breaking or anything, but big rolling waves. And so we would like kind of go up a wave, kind of perpendicular to it, and then down the wave, again perpendicular to it. And then right before we'd hit come out of the trough between the two big waves there, kind of turn at an angle and go up it at a bit of an angle, so it was less like we were diving headfirst into this wall of water, if that makes sense. And the engine had kind of been like not sputtering, but it wasn't making this consistent like happy noise, like something was definitely a little off with it. So we were kind of distracted with that, trying to figure out like what's going on, why is the engine acting up? And I had just handed my phone to my friend. She was going to call her dad to ask him about the engine, if there was anything we were doing wrong or whatever. And as it turned out, at the back of the boat, like the little bilge pump, the switch was broken. So my job, while my buddy was driving the boat, my job was to hold the 2 wires onto the battery to make the bilge pump operate. So I'd take the 2 wires, touch them to the terminals, and then the bilge pump would put this like stream of water about the diameter of a pencil, that much water would be shooting out. And I just did that every so often, and I had a purpose. And so at one point, while we're distracted with this the way the engine's running and whatnot. And like I said, I had just handed my phone to my friend, and so Christian, who's driving the boat, and me we were looking down at like the fuel lines and thinking that we had found, oh, this is why it's running rough. There was like one of those priming pumps. I guess you call it a bulb, I want to call it. And we had gotten the air out of one, but there was a second one that we hadn't seen at first. And so we were distracted to play with that. And then all of a sudden I heard Christian go, oh shit, And when I looked up, I saw what he saw, which was a much larger wave than what we had been going up. And he didn't quite make that diagonal turn. So we went like right into the face of that thing, face of the wave, and this large amount of water poured over the front. And then his reaction, which I now realize was the wrong one, but his natural reaction was to pull the throttle back, like to stop. And he should have just kept it gunned. But when he did that, then our wake caught up to us. And so
backwashed you from the back.
And so I'm facing backwards, sitting there right there with that battery, and I watched there's like a cutout, where the engine goes through. And when the wake caught up to us, it just poured over that in a matter of seconds. I mean, the water, my knees were underwater, and then I remember taking the two wires and holding them to the battery and looking at that little bilge pump spitting out, a pencil diameter worth of water, and then everything was underwater. And then we were treading water, and then the boat kind of went like this and flipped over, and then it just stayed. And I remember looking over at the shore and thinking, yeah, we're all dead. And then no way can we swim, from the middle of Kachemak Bay to the shore.
Yeah, and it's cold water.
Super cold. It was like middle of March.
Yeah, I was going to ask what time of year, what kind of boat traffic is going on that time of year.
Yeah, not a lot, because it was March. And so so we're treading water, and I remember thinking, yep, looking at the shore, yep, we're done. That's too bad.
You didn't get back on the boat. You were just off to the side.
Yep. But then we realized, hey, the boat's not sinking all the way. It's, it's at an angle, like 45-degree angle. Of course, got the weight of the engine trying to pull it down, but all of our dry bags and everything are all strapped in the front of that boat. And the floor of the boat is got a bunch of foam in it, So the combination of that foam and our dry bags all in the front of the thing, is keeping the boat floating. And so we're like, wow, okay, the boat's not sinking. Maybe it'll hold us. And so one at a time, we kind of crawled up on it, and it held. The two gals and the dog kind of got in the front, and then Christian and I were kind of kneeling behind them. And the way the wind, and so the tide was going out, basically pushing us west towards the spit, and the wind was blowing that way too. So it was like, hey, this is kind of good,
Things are looking up.
And then the sun came out. It had been overcast. The sun came out. And I remember looking, you could see way off, of course, on the shore, I could see like cabins and whatnot. And so we had something to gauge our progress by. And the one bad part about the wind and the waves going that same direction as us is because Christian and I are kneeling there, our legs are in the water. So it's like, we were constantly getting splashed and whatnot, like you couldn't, if I sat down, then my ass would be in the water. So instead we were kneeling on this hard, cold metal and our legs are wet. That was a bit of a beating, but it's better than being dead, I guess. So, we'd see boats in the distance, and then we'd see airplanes overhead, but no one could see us. We had a waterproof radio and ended up not being waterproof. Like we turned it on and it just crackled a little and then died. And then my phone, I had just handed it to, I just pulled it out and handed it over to try and call Jess's dad to ask about the motor. So she still had my phone, but I'm looking at her swimming with it. She's holding it swimming. So I'm like, my phone's done. And then we had all these flares and the whole survival thing that I was kicking myself for not grabbing. So they were trapped under the boat. I knew exactly where they were, but we didn't grab it in time, like before the boat flipped over. So we had talked about it. Someone's going to have to go swim. Someone's going to have to swim under and get that, or we're done, And but the water was so cold. I remember at one point, when we were treading water, I remember thinking like, wow, it actually isn't that cold, but it was the adrenaline, But later on, when we were talking about trying to, reach underneath to grab that, to try and either get the flares or someone else had another phone that was in a dry bag, and we knew where it was, but again, couldn't get to it. And at one point, Christian held my legs, and I tried to hang off the side and reach under, and then with no adrenaline, then I realized how cold it was. Like, I almost dropped my knife, and I'm like, oh man, I can't. I really want to be able to swim under the boat, but it's just not going to happen. And so anyway, at first, all we could see at the spit was we could see cranes sticking up above the horizon. And then a little bit later, we could start to see cars, and it looked like cars just driving on the water. You couldn't see the spit yet. And then, okay, now we see the spit. And then we could see a barge in the distance. We're like, man, if we can just get to that barge, then we're home free. Like, I'll spend the night on that barge, because that barge was still a few miles from the spit. But and then we're, doing the math, like, okay, we've been drifting for this long. When's the tide going to turn around and take us the other direction? And meanwhile, boats keep coming out of the spit, but they're just not coming towards us. And then at a certain point, this one boat comes out, and he starts coming towards us, and he stops, and then he goes like at an angle perpendicular to us, and we're like, shoot, he doesn't see us. And then you see that, then we're watching him still, and we see the boat kind of just hang out. It's just paused for a bit, and then he turns towards us, and then he's up on like step, coming towards us with purpose. And I'm like, oh, he sees us, and he did. And so then he pulled up next to us. And as he pulled up next to us, he was already talking to the Coast Guard. And I heard him. First thing he said was, is everyone okay? Do we need help? Do we need like medical assistance? And we said no. And then he told the Coast Guard that, everyone's fine. And then he put a buoy on the boat so that they could find it again. And then we got on his boat, and he took us to the spit. And so his name was Kent Heine, and he was an airline pilot. He had flown in the Air Force and then got out and was flying for the airlines. And he owned a charter fishing company, and the boat had been he had it out of the water all winter, and he had just put it back in the water that day. And they were just going to take it to their little slip and park it, but he said he decided, what the hell, we're already in the water, let's go buzz around. And he said that he saw us right away when he came out of the spit, and he made the comment to his wife at the time, her name was Carrie. He said he made the comment to her, like, look at these guys out there in a Zodiac. What are they doing? He just thought, he couldn't tell that, he just thought
you were foolish.
He just thought we were in a Zodiac. It was right side up,
Right.
But he said that he noticed that we were in the vicinity of his favorite fishing hole. So initially when he came out towards us, he was just going to come talk to us to ask us, like, see what we were catching, because we were in the spot he likes. And then I said, well, okay, cool. But then why'd you turn and you went off this other direction? And he said, oh, because I saw a bunch of stuff. And then he said when he came up to it, he was like, oh, wait a minute, something's not right. And so what he saw was the lighter stuff that we had in the boat that wasn't tied down, drifted away, and the wind pushed it ahead of us. So it was like our cooler. And I forget what else he found, but it was stuff that he was like, this isn't normal. Something's wrong. And that's when he's got his binoculars and looked at us and was like, oh, now I see what happened. He could see the 4 people and a dog, and he couldn't see a boat. And that's when he came at us with purpose,
Right.
So I still talk to him every year. I call him on the anniversary and chat with him just to say thanks, He did. You guys ever, heard those Arctic entries, that series?
Uh-huh.
He did one, and he told the story, which I thought was kind of cool.
Did you go and see that, or were you around?
No, I heard about it after the fact. Like, one of the other people that was on this trip with us, he sent me a YouTube link to it. And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. But yeah, that was Kent's story. So here we are. And then I remember coming back afterwards. This was right around like Easter beer time, and I remember going to a party at Muka's, which is kind of ironic because now that's where I'm living for the summer.
Right.
And people were painting the Easter beers. And Lynn, Ski Patrol Aid Room Lynn, she had painted a scene that was the scene was us. That was the scene. The boat overturned with the people on it in Kachemak Bay. And I took a picture of it. I saw the picture of it, and I wish I would have saved that beer, but it just didn't occur to me at the time. But what I did save from the whole thing is, remember I was telling you, like, my job that morning was like holding the 2 wires onto the battery terminals. I saved I have the big nut from the broken battery terminal. I was like, I'm keeping this. That was my memento. So, that as a result, like, the way I kind of look at things a lot of the time now is, should have died that day. there's multiple times like flying more than once, like I've scared myself or thought like, oh, that was close. I got away with something there, but really like that's the first experience in my life where like should have died. It's just pure luck that the planets aligned and he came out when he did and the tide was going and the wind was going and the sun came out, like all those things lined up. But so everything, I keep reminding myself, like everything after that's all a bonus because I probably should have died there. So I try not to complain too much about other things because, it's all a bonus.
Well, what do they say? I mean, that water's so cold, you only have a matter of minutes before you're numb. And then after that, you can't feel anything. And then you just sleep off.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that same year, there were other people. There was an overturned boat found in Prince William Sound. I mean, it happens in Alaska all the time. They find an overturned boat with nobody. And it's like, wow, they had the same situation as us, but they just didn't get lucky. It also made me think of my first, or one of my first flight instructors in airplanes when I was flying in Colorado. And I did like a mountain checkout, and that you had to get if you wanted to rent a plane from that school and take it into the hills, you had to get a mountain checkout.
Okay.
And so Rick Albin was my instructor, and he was giving me my mountain checkout. And we went up to Leadville and landed at 10,000 feet and did a bunch of other mountain flying stuff. This is all in airplanes, of course. And I remember he had like a big vest on. It was kind of ridiculous looking, but with lots of stuff on it. And he could tell that I thought it looked kind of funny or something. I don't know. But he gave me a bit of a life lesson. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. This might look ridiculous, but it doesn't matter what you have in the airplane. If it's not on you, you don't have it. And I kept thinking that when we were on top of that upside down boat. We got all these flares and all this stuff, and it's useless to us. It's trapped under the boat. And that made me think a lot about like that, and I'm sure you have a similar experience flying around. Like, yeah, I have a bag full of emergency stuff, and where do I put it when I'm flying around? It's in the cheek on the side of the machine.
Right.
Well, if we go in the water, am I getting that out? No. Or, if I end up landing hard somewhere and the thing rolls over, I'm not getting that bag out. There's not really a good place to put that inside the machine, but I think about that a lot. Like what old Rick said, it's totally true. If you don't have it on you, you don't have it.
That was Ryan Skorecki, helicopter pilot extraordinaire. If you want to learn more about him or anything else we talked about at 10 Minute Travels, check us out at 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.
And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.